I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from. We've found the perfect retirement community for you. Mom, I'm putting the house on the market next week. Those words from my son-in-law Robert sent a chill through my body that had nothing to do with the autumn breeze rustling through my garden. I was 68, not 98, and my Victorian home on Maple Hill had been my sanctuary for 47 years. What Robert didn't know as he stood there in his expensive suit, clipboard in hand, was that beneath the flower beds he was so eager to bulldoze lay the foundation of a fortune he couldn't begin to imagine. The morning everything changed began like any other Tuesday. I was in my garden at dawn, camera positioned carefully on its tripod, capturing the morning light filtering through the Japanese maples my late husband Walter had planted on our 5th anniversary. "Good morning, garden friends," I said to the camera with a smile. "Grace Sullivan here, coming to you from Willow Creek with another episode of Wisdom in Bloom. Today we're discussing companion planting for your autumn herbs." My little YouTube channel had started as a way to combat loneliness after Walter passed 3 years ago. Now, with just over 5,000 subscribers, it had become my passion connecting with other gardeners who didn't believe age should limit their ability to dig in the dirt and create beauty. I carefully adjusted my wide-brimmed hat, conscious of how the early light might wash out my features. At 68, I'd earned every line on my face, but lighting was still important for clarity on camera. "Remember," I continued, gesturing to the raised beds behind me, "thyme and rosemary might seem like unlikely neighbors, but they thrive together just like some of the most surprising friendships in our lives." My phone chimed with a text notification, momentarily breaking my concentration. "And speaking of unlikely companions," I laughed, "it seems my weekly book club is arriving early today. I'll finish our herb discussion tomorrow. Don't forget to comment with your favorite herb pairings." I turned off the camera just as Harriet's vintage Cadillac pulled into my circular driveway, followed by Dolores's practical Subaru and Beatrice's sleek Tesla. The Unbreakable Roses, as we called ourselves, had been meeting every Tuesday for almost 20 years. What had started as a neighborhood book club had evolved into a support system of 4 widows navigating their later years with humor, wisdom, and occasional mischief. Grace, Harriet called, waving a bottle of wine despite it being barely 10 in the morning. At 72, with her silver hair cut in a fashionable bob and always dressed in vibrant colors, Harriet was our resident artist and free spirit. I brought that Cabernet we talked about. Thought we might need it when we discussed the ending of this month's book. Dolores, our retired nurse, climbed carefully from her car, carrying a basket of fresh-baked scones. At 75, she moved more slowly than the rest of us, but compensated with razor-sharp observation skills honed during 40 years in the emergency room. "Those look delicious." "Dolores," I called, pulling off my gardening gloves. "And likely more nutritionally sound than whatever Harriet's planning to serve us." "It's not a proper book club without a little indulgence," Harriet replied with a wink. Beatrice was the last to join us, her posture as impeccable as when she'd argued cases before the state Supreme Court. At 69, her retirement from law had not dulled her analytical mind or her penchant for designer suits. "Ladies," she said, adjusting her glasses, "before we discuss Jane Austen for the 100th time, I've brought something more interesting." She pulled a newspaper from her leather briefcase. "Did you see the article about elder fraud in Oak Ridge 3? Seniors lost their homes last month to their own family members." I ushered everyone inside, trying not to let Beatrice's news dampen my spirits. "Let's save the depressing stories until after coffee. Shall we?" My home was my pride and joy, a 3-story Victorian built in 1892 with original hardwood floors, stained glass windows, and a wraparound porch that caught the morning sun perfectly. Walter and I had spent decades restoring it, room by room, preserving its history while making it comfortable for modern living. "How's the garden channel going?" Dolores asked as we settled in my sunroom, the table already set for our gathering. "My granddaughter showed me how to subscribe last week. I'm officially your oldest fan." "Not your oldest," Harriet corrected. "Mrs. Finkelstein from Florida commented that she's 92 and just started her first herb garden because of you." Grace. I poured coffee into Walter's favorite china cups, another small way I kept him present in my daily life. "The channel's doing well. Nothing viral, but it's fulfilling. I'm thinking of branching out into medicinal herbs next month. Speaking of branching out, Beatrice said, stirring her coffee meticulously, have you thought more about the genealogy project the Historical Society would pay handsomely for your family records, especially with this house's connection to the town's founding? Before I could answer, my phone rang Allison's special ringtone. My daughter rarely called during working hours. Excuse me, ladies, it's Allison. I stepped into the hallway to take the call. Allison, is everything all right? Mom, just checking that you'll be home this afternoon. Robert and I are stopping by around 4. We have something important to discuss. A slight tremor in her voice concerned me. Of course, dear. Is everything okay? Everything's fine. We need to talk about some arrangements for your future. The call ended before I could ask more questions, leaving me with an uneasy feeling in the pit of my stomach. When I returned to the sunroom, my friends immediately sensed my discomfort. What's wrong? Grace, you look like you've seen a ghost, Harriet said, patting the seat beside her. Allison and Robert are coming over this afternoon to discuss arrangements for my future, I replied, making air quotes with my fingers. The room fell silent. We'd all heard stories from friends whose children had decided they could no longer live independently. Beatrice was the first to speak, her legal mind already at work. Do you have your documents in order, Will? Power of attorney. Advance directive. Walter took care of all that before he passed. Everything should be in his study. Good, Beatrice nodded. Let's not jump to conclusions, but be prepared. Remember Martha Wilson? Her son-in-law convinced her she was becoming forgetful, when all she had was a minor hearing problem. Dolores reached over to squeeze my hand. You're sharp as a tack, Grace Sullivan, and healthier than most people 20 years younger. And if Robert tries anything underhanded, Harriet added with a gleam in her eye, we'll tie him up and feed him nothing but Dolores's sugar-free, gluten-free brownies until he comes to his senses. We all laughed, even Dolores, who was notorious for her healthy but taste-challenged baking experiments. Let's get back to Jane Austen, I suggested, grateful for the distraction. I believe we were debating whether Mr. Darcy would be considered husband material by today's standards. Wealthy, brooding, and socially awkward, Harriet snorted. That's half the dating pool in our age bracket. And just like that, for a few hours, surrounded by laughter and friendship. I could almost forget the foreboding that had settled over me like an early frost. At precisely 4 o'clock, Robert's black Mercedes pulled into my driveway, even from the window. I could see the tension in Allison's posture as she stepped out of the passenger side. My daughter had always been easy to read, a trait she inherited from her father. I straightened the living room one last time, though it was already immaculate. 3 years after Walter's death, I still maintained our home as if he might walk through the door at any moment, commenting on the museum-like preservation of his favorite reading chair. The doorbell rang, and I took a deep breath before answering. Mom, Allison embraced me with unusual intensity. At 42, she looked more like me than I sometimes cared to admit. The same chestnut hair, though mine was now liberally streaked with silver, the same oval face and stubborn chin. Robert stood behind her, tall and imposing in his charcoal suit. At 45, my son-in-law had the polished appearance of success, distinguished salt and pepper hair, confident posture, and an expression that never quite reached his eyes. Grace, he nodded, offering a perfunctory kiss on my cheek. You're looking well. Thank you. Robert, please, come in. I've made tea. As they followed me to the sitting room, I noticed Robert's eyes scanning the antique furniture, the crystal chandelier, the oil paintings that had been in Walter's family for generations. Not for the first time. I felt like he was mentally appraising everything. Mom, your roses look beautiful this year, Allison said as we settled into the seating area. I don't know how you do it. 40 years of practice, dear, and talking to them. Plants respond to kindness, just like people. Robert cleared his throat. Grace, we wanted to talk to you about something important, about your future. I poured tea into Walter's grandmother's china cups. My future. That sounds ominous. Not at all, he continued smoothly. It's about ensuring you have the best quality of life in your advanced years. My hand stilled on the teapot. My advanced years, I'm 68. Robert, not ancient. Of course not. Allison interjected quickly. It's just that this house is so large for one person. The maintenance, the stairs, the garden, it's a lot for anyone to manage alone. I'm managing quite well, I replied, passing them each a cup. The garden keeps me active, and I have a service for the heavy cleaning twice a month. Robert set his untouched tea aside. Grace, we found a wonderful senior living community called Sunset Meadows. It's exclusive, with excellent amenities, a golf course, swimming pool, social activities. You'd have a lovely 2-bedroom apartment with no maintenance worries. And it has 24-hour medical staff, Allison added, just in case. The room suddenly felt very cold. I see. And what would happen to my home? Robert leaned forward. All business now. That's the beauty of this plan. The house would be sold, and the proceeds would cover your expenses at Sunset Meadows for years to come. No financial worries. I don't have financial worries now, I said quietly. Walter left everything in good order. But property taxes keep rising, Robert countered. And this house must cost a fortune to heat in winter. Plus, these old Victorians always need repairs. The sensible thing is to sell while the market is strong. I looked at my daughter, searching for the real story behind this sudden concern. Allison, is this really what you think is best for me? She wouldn't meet my eyes. Mom, we worry about you alone in this big house. What if you fell? What if there was a break-in? Sunset Meadows is safe and secure. I set down my teacup, noting the slight tremble in my hand. This is quite sudden. I'll need time to consider it, of course. Robert smiled, though it didn't reach his eyes. But I should mention, there's currently a waiting list for Sunset Meadows. I pulled some strings to secure a spot for you, but they need an answer within 2 weeks. 2 weeks to decide whether to leave the home where I've spent most of my adult life. I couldn't keep the edge from my voice. Mom, we're just trying to help, Allison said, reaching for my hand. I know, dear. I squeezed her fingers gently. But this is a major decision. I'd like to at least visit this place before discussing it further. Absolutely, Robert nodded. I'll arrange a tour for next week. In the meantime, I've brought some brochures and information packets. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a glossy folder emblazoned with Sunset Meadows Elegant Living for Your Golden Years. The cover showed smiling seniors playing tennis and sipping cocktails poolside, none of whom looked a day over 60. As Robert launched into his well-rehearsed pitch about activities and amenities, my mind drifted to the first time I'd met him, 15 years ago. Allison had brought him home for Thanksgiving, proudly introducing the ambitious financial advisor she'd been dating for 6 months. I remembered Walter's assessment later that night. He's driven, no doubt about that. But I wonder what's driving him. My husband had always been an excellent judge of character. Grace, Robert's voice pulled me back to the present. Did you hear what I said about the gourmet dining options? Yes, it sounds lovely, I lied. But I enjoy cooking for myself. It's one of my pleasures. The apartments have kitchenettes, Allison offered. You could still make your morning tea and simple meals. A kitchenette, I repeated. Instead of my kitchen with Walter's grandmother's copper pots and the breakfast nook where you did your homework every day after school. Allison had the grace to look uncomfortable. Mom, I know this is hard to consider, but we really believe it's for the best. Why don't we discuss it over dinner? I suggested, needing time to process this ambush. I made Walter's beef bourguignon. It's in the slow cooker. Actually, Robert checked his watch. We have dinner reservations at Le Bistro at 6. Important client meeting, but we can certainly continue this discussion another time. I see. I stood, smoothing my skirt. Well, don't let me keep you from your meeting. You could join us, Mom, Allison offered, though we all knew it was an empty gesture. No, dear, you go ahead. I'll just freeze the bourguignon for another time. As I walked them to the door, Robert paused in the foyer, looking up at the crystal chandelier that had been a wedding gift to Walter's grandparents. Beautiful piece, he commented. Probably worth a small fortune to the right collector. It's not for sale, Robert, I said firmly. Neither is anything else in this house. After they left, I stood on the porch watching their car disappear down the street. The autumn air felt particularly crisp, carrying the scent of wood smoke from a neighbor's chimney. Inside, I went straight to Walter's study, a room I maintained exactly as he had left it, down to the half-empty cup of pencils on his desk and the dog-eared copy of The Great Gatsby on his side table. I sank into his leather chair, drawing comfort from its familiar embrace, and whispered to the empty room, "Walter, I think we have a problem." Dinner that evening was a solitary affair, a small bowl of the bourguignon at the kitchen island rather than the formal dining room. As I ate, I replayed the afternoon's conversation, analyzing each word and gesture. Robert's eagerness to sell the house seemed disproportionate to his professed concern for my welfare, and Allison's uncharacteristic avoidance of eye contact suggested there was more to the story than they were telling me. After dinner, I called Beatrice. "They want to sell my house and move me into a retirement community," I said without preamble when she answered. "I was afraid of that," Beatrice replied. "Did they give you a timeline?" "2 weeks to decide. Robert's already put a deposit down on a place called Sunset Meadows." "Sunset Meadows?" Beatrice's tone sharpened. "That's the place Harold Thompson moved into last year, sold his lakefront property for a fraction of its worth to pay the entrance fee. Is it a bad facility?" "No. It's very upscale, but outrageously expensive, with endless add-on fees. Harold's daughter manages his finances now because the costs were draining his accounts." I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the evening air. "Robert said the proceeds from selling my house would cover the expenses for years." "Maybe," Beatrice said skeptically. "But Victorian homes in historic districts are expensive to maintain, but often sell below market value because buyers are limited." "Did he mention an asking price?" "No, but he's been eyeing my chandelier like it's made of solid gold." "It practically is. Grace, that's a 19th century Waterford crystal piece, if I remember correctly. Museum quality." I glanced up at the chandelier in question, which had illuminated family dinners, holiday gatherings, and quiet evenings with Walter for nearly 5 decades. "What do you think is really going on?" "Beatrice," there was a pause before she answered, "I don't want to cast aspersions without evidence, but in my experience, sudden concern about an elderly parent's living situation, when that parent is perfectly capable, often has financial motivations." "You think they need money?" "It's possible. Robert's in finance, right? That sector's been volatile lately. Or maybe they just see an opportunity." "That house of yours is worth a small fortune, especially with the historical designation." After hanging up, I climbed the stairs to the 3rd floor, my one concession to age being that I took them more slowly than I once had. The small room at the end of the hall had been converted to a storage space years ago, filled with boxes of family mementos and seasonal decorations. Behind a stack of Christmas ornaments was a fireproof safe Walter had installed when we first moved in. I hadn't opened it since his death, trusting that everything was in order as he'd always promised. The combination our wedding date worked on the first try. Inside were our marriage certificate, birth certificates, Walter's life insurance policy already paid out, the deed to the house, and a sealed envelope with my name written in Walter's distinctive handwriting. I sat cross-legged on the floor like a much younger woman and carefully opened the envelope. Inside was a letter dated just 2 weeks before his unexpected heart attack. "My dearest Grace," it began in Walter's elegant script. "If you're reading this, something has happened to me, and you're looking for answers. First and foremost, know that you have been the great joy and love of my life." Tears blurred my vision before I could read further. I folded the letter and returned it to the safe. Whatever Walter had wanted to tell me would have to wait until I could read it without my heart breaking all over again. As I made my way back downstairs, my phone chimed with a text from Allison. "Sorry about the rushed visit today. Love you, Mom. Please just consider what we discussed." I typed back, "I love you too. We'll think about it." But what I was really thinking about was why my usually transparent daughter couldn't look me in the eye, and why Robert seemed so eager to liquidate my home and possessions. Sleep eluded me that night. I lay awake watching moonlight filter through the stained glass transom Walter had meticulously restored the summer before Allison was born. Every corner of this house held memories not just of Walter, but of our life together, our daughter growing up, celebrations and sorrows shared within these walls. The thought of leaving it all behind for a kitchenette in a building full of strangers made my chest tight with anxiety. Just before dawn, I gave up on sleep and made my way to the garden. In the gray light of early morning, I knelt in the soft earth and began weeding an activity that had always cleared my mind and settled my spirit. "What would you do?" "Walter," I whispered to the Japanese maple he'd planted. "What are you trying to tell me from that letter I can't bring myself to read?" The tree offered no answers, but as the sun broke over the horizon, illuminating the autumn foliage in shades of gold and crimson, a sense of determination settled over me. This was my home, my sanctuary, and I wasn't going to be rushed into abandoning it without understanding the full picture. The following week brought a flurry of unexpected activity to my normally peaceful home. First came the casual drop-by from a real estate agent Robert knew professionally. "Just in the neighborhood and thought I'd say hello," the woman chirped, her practiced gaze assessing my foyer. What a charming home. These original features must be a labor of love to maintain. I offered her tea, but not a tour, making it clear I had gardening waiting. She left her card with a too bright smile. "Just in case you ever think about downsizing." 2 days later, a building inspector arrived, claiming Robert had arranged for a routine assessment of the property. "I didn't authorize any inspection," I informed him firmly from my doorway. The man looked uncomfortable. "Mr. Harper said it was a surprise gift for you, peace of mind about the structural integrity. Please tell Mr. Harper that I don't appreciate surprises that involve strangers evaluating my home without my permission." After he left, I called Allison at work, something I rarely did. "Mom, is everything okay?" Her voice held a note of worry. "I'm fine, but I'd appreciate if you and Robert would consult me before sending people to inspect my house." A pause. "What people?" "The real estate agent on Monday. The building inspector today." "Oh." Another pause. "I'm sorry. Mom, Robert is just trying to be thorough about your options. They're not options if I haven't agreed to consider them. Allison, this is still my home, and these are still my decisions." That evening, Robert called. His tone was all smooth concern. "Grace, I apologize if the inspector caught you off guard. I was just trying to ensure the house is safe and sound for you. By evaluating its market value," I asked pointedly. A slight hesitation. "That's not—" "Well, yes. Having that information would be part of making an informed decision about Sunset Meadows. The tour is scheduled for Friday at 10 a.m., by the way." "I'll be there," I promised. "But Robert, please don't send any more surprise visitors to my home." "Of course," he agreed readily. "By the way, Allison and I would like to take you to dinner afterward. There's a financial matter we need to discuss." My suspicion deepened. "What kind of financial matter?" "Nothing concerning," he assured me. "Just some portfolio adjustments I'm recommending. Friday at Giovanni's, then around noon." After hanging up, I sat in Walter's study again, my gaze falling on his collection of leather-bound classics. Walter had been a professor of literature at the local college, not a particularly lucrative career, but one he'd loved. We'd always lived comfortably, if not extravagantly, on his salary and my income as a part-time librarian. When he died, I discovered he'd been more financially prudent than I'd realized. His life insurance, pension, and our modest investments provided me with enough to maintain our home and lifestyle without worry. Not wealth by Robert's standards, perhaps, but security. So why the sudden concern about my finances? Friday morning dawned bright and clear, one of those perfect autumn days that make you grateful to be alive to witness it. I dressed carefully for the Sunset Meadows tour in a cornflower blue suit that Walter had always said matched my eyes, with my grandmother's pearl earrings and comfortable walking shoes. Robert picked me up precisely at 9:30. "Allison wanted to come," he explained as he helped me into his car, "but she couldn't get away from work. She'll meet us at Giovanni's." Sunset Meadows was located on the outskirts of town, a sprawling complex of identical beige buildings, surrounded by meticulously maintained but soulless landscaping. The circular driveway led to an entrance that resembled an upscale hotel, complete with uniformed doorman and valet parking. Inside, a perky young woman named Brittany with a blinding smile greeted us in the marble-floored lobby. "Welcome to Sunset Meadows. You must be Mrs. Sullivan. Mr. Harper has told us so much about you." "It's Ms. Sullivan, actually," I corrected gently. "Or Grace is fine. Of course now, let me show you all our wonderful amenities before we look at the residence we have available for you." The tour was comprehensive: a dining room with white tablecloths and hushed conversations, a gym with specialized equipment for seniors, a small library, craft rooms, and a swimming pool where an aqua aerobics class was in progress. Our residents love the social aspect, Brittany enthused. There's always something happening: movie nights, guest lecturers, day trips to the symphony. I nodded politely, noting that most of the residents I saw looked considerably older and less mobile than me. The few who met my eyes had expressions ranging from resignation to vague confusion. "And here's the apartment we have available," Brittany announced, unlocking a door on the second floor of Building C. "It's one of our premium units, with a lovely view of the garden area." The apartment was pristine and utterly generic: cream walls, beige carpet, standard-issue furniture that looked like it had never been sat upon. The kitchenette consisted of a mini refrigerator, a 2-burner stove, and about 2 feet of counter space. "The bathroom is fully accessible," Brittany pointed out. "With grab bars and an emergency call button, safety is our top priority at Sunset Meadows." I wandered to the window. The view was of a small courtyard with a few benches and carefully placed shrubs, nothing like my rambling garden with its riot of colors and textures. "It's very tidy," I managed. "Mom loves to garden," Robert explained to Brittany. "Are residents allowed to plant anything in the common areas?" "Oh, we have a gardening club," Brittany exclaimed. "They maintain the community vegetable beds behind Building F, under staff supervision, of course." After the tour, Brittany escorted us to a small office where a serious man named Mr. Thornton waited with a folder of paperwork. "Now, let's discuss the financial aspects," he began, sliding a fee schedule across the desk. "The entrance fee for a premium unit is $350,000, which is largely refundable if Mrs. Sullivan ever decides to leave. Then there's the monthly service fee of $500, which covers all amenities, 1 meal per day, weekly housekeeping, and emergency response services." I blinked at the figures. "That's more than my current annual expenses for everything combined. Quality care comes at a premium." Mr. Thornton smiled thinly. "But consider the peace of mind it provides your family." Robert nodded enthusiastically. "And remember, selling your house would more than cover the entrance fee, with plenty left over for the monthly costs. We do have a wait list," Mr. Thornton added. "But Mr. Harper has put down a holding deposit to secure this unit for you. We just need a decision within the next week." I felt a surge of irritation. "A week to decide whether to completely change my life and give up my home? That seems rather rushed." "The senior living market is competitive," Mr. Thornton replied smoothly. "Premium units like this don't remain available for long." As we left the facility, Robert was unusually quiet. "What did you think?" he finally asked as we drove toward Giovanni's. "It's very institutional," I said carefully. "Everyone was friendly, but it doesn't feel like a home to me." "Robert, it feels like a very expensive hotel where they monitor when I take my pills." "That's the point, Grace. You'd be cared for. No worries about home maintenance or security or medical emergencies." "I don't have those worries now," I countered. "I'm healthy, active, and perfectly capable in my own home. But for how long?" His tone held an edge I hadn't heard before. "The reality is, you're getting older. Things happen. Stairs become hazards. Gardens become burdens. When that day comes, if it comes, I'll reconsider. But that day isn't today." We arrived at Giovanni's in tense silence. Allison was already waiting at a table, looking nervous as she checked her watch. "Mom, how was the tour?" she asked as I slid into the booth beside her. "Very informative," I replied diplomatically. "The facility is certainly comprehensive." Robert ordered wine for the table without consulting either of us. "Grace has some concerns about the cost," he told Allison. "Oh." Allison fidgeted with her napkin. "But the house would cover that." "Right, theoretically," I said. "But I'm not interested in selling my house. Allison, it's my home, not just an asset to liquidate." The waiter arrived with the wine, and Robert waited until he'd poured and departed before leaning forward. "Grace, there's something you should know. We're concerned about more than just your physical safety." "What do you mean?" He exchanged a glance with Allison, who looked increasingly uncomfortable. "Your financial situation may not be as secure as you believe. The market has been volatile, and Walter's investments may not provide the long-term security you're counting on. Walter was very conservative with our investments, I countered, and I live well within my means. Property taxes in the historic district have increased by 15% in the last 2 years alone, Robert pressed. And that house, charming as it is, will need significant repairs soon. The roof alone could cost upwards of $30,000 to replace. The roof was replaced 5 years ago, I said flatly. Walter made sure of it before his health declined. Allison touched my hand. Mom, we're just worried about you being house poor. All your assets tied up in a property you can't easily maintain. I appreciate the concern, I sassy said, trying to keep my voice level. But my finances are in order. Eleanor Winters, Walter's attorney, reviews everything with me quarterly. Robert's expression tightened at the mention of Eleanor Walters' longtime friend and legal advisor, a formidable woman who had never bothered to hide her reservations about my son-in-law. Eleanor is near retirement herself, he said dismissively. With all due respect, financial management has evolved since her prime. As your son-in-law and a certified financial advisor, I'm offering to review your portfolio professionally. Thank you, but I'm satisfied with Eleanor's guidance. The conversation mercifully shifted to safer topics as our meals arrived: Allison's work as an architectural designer, the unusually warm autumn, an upcoming exhibit at the art museum. But the underlying tension remained, crackling beneath the polite exchange. As Robert excused himself to take a phone call outside, Allison leaned closer to me. Mom, please don't be upset. We really are just concerned about your future. Allison, look me in the eye and tell me this sudden concern isn't related to some financial issue you and Robert are facing. My daughter's gaze dropped to her plate. It's complicated. Mom, uncomplicate it for me, I pressed gently. Robert's firm has been going through some changes. There's been talk of downsizing, and his position might be affected. She twisted her wedding ring nervously. But that's not why we're suggesting Sunset Meadows. We genuinely think it would be better for you. Before I could respond, Robert returned to the table, his expression carefully composed, but a tightness around his eyes suggesting the phone call hadn't been pleasant. Everything okay? Allison asked him. Just work, he said dismissively. Now, where were we? The rest of lunch passed in strained conversation. As we were preparing to leave, Robert excused himself to pay the bill, leaving his suit jacket draped over his chair. As I reached for my purse, I accidentally knocked his jacket to the floor. When I picked it up, a folded letter fell from the pocket, the distinctive letterhead of First National Bank clearly visible. Without thinking, I glanced at the exposed portion of the letter. Final notice regarding your mortgage payment. Foreclosure proceedings will commence. I quickly replaced the letter and hung the jacket back on the chair, my heart pounding. Robert and Allison were facing foreclosure on their home, a sprawling contemporary house in an exclusive neighborhood that Robert had insisted they needed for networking with the right clients. Suddenly, their urgent interest in selling my house made perfect, terrible sense. Robert returned, oblivious to my discovery. Ready to go. Grace, I'll drop you home before heading back to the office. The ride home was largely silent, my mind racing with implications of what I'd learned. As Robert pulled into my driveway, he turned to me with what he probably thought was a warm smile. Think about what we've discussed. Grace, Sunset Meadows really would give you all of us peace of mind. I'll think about it, I promised, knowing my definition of thinking about it was vastly different from his. Inside my house, I went straight to Walter's study and settled into his chair, trying to channel his wisdom and steady presence. They're in financial trouble, Walter, I said to the empty room, and they see our home as the solution. For the first time since his death, I felt truly alone with a decision that would affect the rest of my life and potentially my relationship with my only child. I pulled out my phone and called Eleanor Winters. Eleanor, it's Grace Sullivan. I need your help. Can you come over tomorrow? There's something important we need to discuss. As I hung up, my gaze fell on the bookcase behind Walter's desk specifically, on a slight gap between his collected works of Dickens and the wall, something I'd never noticed before, despite 3 years of sitting in this very chair seeking comfort from his memory. Curious, I moved closer and reached into the gap, my fingers brushing against what felt like a folder pushed far back between the bookcase and the wall. The folder was dusty and unmarked, wedged so tightly behind Walter's bookcase that retrieving it required moving several volumes of his beloved Dickens collection. How long had it been there? And more importantly, why had Walter hidden it? I settled back into his chair, carefully opening the folder to reveal a stack of documents I'd never seen before. The top page was a letter from Westmore Technologies dated just months before Walter's death, acknowledging receipt of his patent application for a novel approach to water filtration using sustainable materials. Patent application: Walter had been a literature professor, not an inventor. At least, not that he'd ever mentioned to me. The next document was more shocking: a royalty statement from Westmore Technologies showing quarterly payments for previous patents. The amount made me gasp audibly, 6 figures per quarter for the past decade. My hands trembled as I continued through the papers. Bank statements for accounts I'd never known existed. Investment portfolios far more extensive than the modest ones Eleanor had been managing for me. Deeds to properties in 3 different states. And at the bottom of the stack, a sealed envelope with my name written in Walter's familiar handwriting, identical to the one I'd found in the safe upstairs, but had been too emotional to read. This time, I carefully broke the seal and unfolded the letter inside. "My dearest Grace," it began, just like the other. "If you're finding this letter, then either I've told you about my other work, or you've discovered it after my passing. I hope it's the former, but I fear it may be the latter." I took a deep breath and continued reading. "I never meant to keep secrets from you, my love. When I first began tinkering with water filtration systems as a hobby, I never imagined it would lead to patents or royalties. It started as a way to help communities like the one where I grew up, places where clean water wasn't a given. As the inventions became successful and the money started coming in, I intended to tell you, but you were so proud of our simple, academic life, the way we managed on our salaries, never needing luxury or excess. I worried that suddenly becoming wealthy would change things between us, or change how you saw me. So I created a separate financial identity for these activities, not to hide money from you, but to protect our life from being altered by it. I've invested carefully, purchased income-generating properties, and ensured that you will never want for anything, should something happen to me. Eleanor knows everything. She's been managing the business side of these ventures from the beginning. Go to her with this letter, and she'll explain the full extent of what I've built for us. For you. I've been gathering courage to tell you for years. Each time I've come close, I've lost my nerve, afraid of how you might react to learning your husband of 40 years has been living a double life, not of infidelity or dishonesty, but of unexpected success. I never knew how to share. Please forgive me for this deception. Know that everything I've done has been with you in my heart. You are, and always have been, the reason for everything good in my life. With all my love for all my life. Walter. Tears streamed down my face as I finished reading. My Walter, my brilliant, modest, loving. Walter had been a successful inventor all these years. He'd created a fortune while continuing to live our quiet academic life, grading papers at this very desk while managing a secret empire I'd never suspected. I wasn't angry. How could I be? The letter radiated his love and his characteristic concern for others, worried about how wealth might change our relationship rather than embracing the status it could have given him. But I was stunned. And curious. What else didn't I know about the man I'd loved for nearly 50 years? More pressingly, what did this mean for my current situation with Robert and Allison? I carefully replaced the documents in the folder, except for Walter's letter, which I folded and placed in my pocket close to my heart. Then I called Eleanor again. "Eleanor, I need to see you immediately. I found Walter's letter. The one about his other work." There was a moment of silence on the line. "I've been waiting for this call for 3 years. Grace, I'll be there in 30 minutes. True to her word, Eleanor's sleek Jaguar pulled into my driveway exactly half an hour later. At 72, Eleanor Winters remained an imposing figure, tall, silver-haired, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit that spoke of both wealth and taste. She'd been Walter's friend since their college days and had served as his attorney for almost as long. "You found the folder," she said without preamble as I showed her into Walter's study. It wasn't a question. Behind the Dickens collection, I confirmed, though I first found another letter in the upstairs safe. I couldn't bring myself to read it until today. Eleanor nodded, her expression softening. Walter wanted to tell you himself. We had discussed it many times. He was planning to take you on a special trip for your 45th anniversary, show you everything he'd built, explain why he'd kept it separate. But he died before he could. Yes? She settled into the visitor's chair across from Walter's desk. And I've been waiting for the right moment to tell you. Walter made me promise not to overwhelm you with everything immediately after his death. He said, let her grieve the husband she knew before introducing her to the one she didn't. I sat in Walter's chair, running my fingers over the worn leather armrests. So tell me now, who was this other Walter? Eleanor smiled a rare expression for her normally serious face. The same Walter you knew and loved, just with an unexpected talent for invention and a surprising head for business. Over the next 2 hours, Eleanor laid out the full extent of Walter's other work. It had begun, as his letter said, with a water filtration system designed for developing countries inspired by his childhood in a rural community with contaminated well water. That first invention had led to others, all focused on practical solutions to environmental problems. Walter held 23 patents, Eleanor explained, most of them licensed to Westmore Technologies. The royalties alone generate over $2 million annually. I nearly choked. $2 million annually. Yes, and that's just the beginning. He invested the early proceeds in real estate, primarily commercial properties in growing areas. The portfolio now includes office buildings in 4 cities, a small shopping center, and several apartment complexes. My head was spinning. How much? What's the total value of everything? Eleanor consulted a document from her briefcase. As of last quarter's assessment, approximately $47 million. The room seemed to tilt slightly. I gripped the arms of Walter's chair. I'm a multimillionaire. How is that possible without me knowing? Walter created a series of trusts and holding companies. Everything is perfectly legal, Eleanor assured me. He just kept it separate from your daily lives. The quarterly reviews we've been doing were just for the small portion he kept visible your house. The modest investment accounts. His pension. But why didn't you tell me after he died? Eleanor's expression turned apologetic. Walter left specific instructions. He worried that if you learned about the money too soon after his death, you might make decisions out of grief rather than careful consideration. He asked me to wait until either you discovered the truth yourself or until a situation arose where the information was necessary for your protection. And you think that time is now? Based on what you told me on the phone about Robert and Allison pressuring you to sell your home, yes, I believe Walter would want you to have all the facts. I stood and walked to the window, looking out at the garden where the late afternoon sun gilded the autumn foliage. There's more to it than just pressure. I discovered today that Robert and Allison are facing foreclosure on their home. I think they need money, and they see selling my house as the solution. Eleanor's expression hardened. That doesn't surprise me. I never trusted Robert Harper. Walter didn't either. Walter never said anything negative about Robert. He wouldn't have worried you, but he had concerns about Robert's character, his focus on appearances, his financial decisions, the way he sometimes treated Allison when he thought no one was looking. This was another revelation. Walter and I had always been honest with each other, or so I'd thought. Learning he'd had reservations about our son-in-law that he'd never shared made me wonder what else he might have kept from me. Walter added a specific clause to his trust, Eleanor continued. The bulk of the assets remain in your control, but with provisions to protect them from potential manipulation by Robert. Walter really thought Robert might try to get his hands on his money. Walter was a cautious man who protected what he loved, Eleanor said simply, and he loved you above all else. She reached into her briefcase again and extracted another folder. There's something else you should know. Among Walter's commercial properties is the Riverfront Tower in downtown Hartford. All right, I said, not seeing the significance. Riverfront Tower's primary tenant is Somerset Financial Advisors. She paused meaningfully. Robert's firm. I sank back into Walter's chair. Robert works in a building Walter owned. Does he know? No. Walter used a holding company called Maple Hill Enterprises as the owner of record. Robert would have no way of knowing the connection unless he investigated deeply, which I doubt he has. The irony was almost too much. Robert, who had always subtly condescended to Walter's academic career, had been paying rent to him all along. What should I do? Eleanor, about Robert and Allison. I mean, that depends on what you want. Grace, you have options now more than you realized. You could move to Sunset Meadows if that's truly what you desire, though I suspect it isn't. You could stay right here. You could buy a castle in Scotland if you fancied it. A small smile touched her lips. Walter wanted you to have choices, not constraints. I thought about Allison, my only child, caught between her mother and her husband, and about Robert, whose financial troubles were clearly driving his sudden concern for my living situation. I need time to process all this, I said finally, to decide how to handle Robert and Allison without destroying my relationship with my daughter. Of course, Eleanor gathered her papers. I'll leave these files with you to review, and Grace Walter would be proud of how you're handling this. He always said you were the strongest person he knew, though you never seemed to realize it yourself. After Eleanor left, I remained in Walter's study for hours, reading through the documents she'd provided, trying to reconcile the husband I'd known with this secret financial wizard who'd built an empire without ever changing his tweed jackets or modest lifestyle. As darkness fell, I finally made my way upstairs to bed, Walter's letter still in my pocket. Sleep eluded me as questions tumbled through my mind. How would I use this newfound knowledge? What would Walter want me to do? And perhaps most pressingly, how would I confront Robert's manipulations without alienating my daughter in the process? Just before dawn, as the first pale light filtered through my bedroom window, I came to a decision. I wouldn't be rushed into selling my home or moving to Sunset Meadows, but neither would I immediately reveal what I'd learned about Walter's fortune. First, I needed to understand exactly what Robert was planning and why my daughter couldn't look me in the eye when discussing my future. The next morning, I called Beatrice bright and early. I need legal advice, I said when she answered, the words tumbling out before I could second-guess myself. Not as my friend, but as a lawyer. I'm retired, Grace, she reminded me gently. I know, but you still have your license, and I trust you. This is complicated. 30 minutes later, Beatrice arrived at my door, dressed more formally than usual in a charcoal pantsuit, carrying a leather briefcase that looked like it had seen decades of courtroom battles. You sounded serious, she explained, nodding to her attire. When a friend calls a retired lawyer for professional advice, it warrants the suit. In Walter's study, I told her everything: the pressure from Robert and Allison, the discovery of Walter's hidden fortune, and my suspicions about Robert's financial troubles. Beatrice listened without interruption, her expression growing increasingly grave. When I finished, she opened her briefcase and removed a legal pad. Let me get this straight, she said, pen poised. You've discovered you're worth approximately $47 million. Your son-in-law is facing foreclosure, and he's simultaneously pressuring you to sell your home and move into an expensive retirement community that would liquidate your most visible asset. That's the situation, I confirmed. And you haven't told them about Walter's fortune? No, Eleanor suggested I wait until I've decided how to proceed. Beatrice nodded approvingly. Eleanor Winters is as sharp as ever. I agree with her assessment. What concerns me most, I continued, is whether Robert might try something more drastic if I continue to refuse Sunset Meadows, such as, I don't know exactly, but he seemed very determined. And now I know he's desperate financially. Beatrice's expression hardened. Are you asking if he might try to have you declared incompetent force a guardianship? The question sent a chill through me, even though it articulated the fear I hadn't wanted to name. Could he do that? It's difficult but not impossible, especially if he's a financial advisor with connections to doctors who might provide convenient evaluations. She tapped her pen against the legal pad. Has he made any comments about your memory? Your ability to care for yourself suggested you're making poor decisions. I thought back to our recent interactions. He's mentioned several times that the house is too much for me to manage, And at lunch yesterday, he suggested Eleanor was too old to properly advise me on finances. Classic groundwork, Beatrice muttered, making notes. Establishing a pattern of concern about your capabilities. What should I do? First, we document your current mental and physical health. I suggest a complete physical with your doctor, one Robert didn't recommend. We get baseline cognitive testing done, proving you're fully competent. And then we prepare for the possibility that Robert might escalate. We gather evidence of his financial troubles, public records of the foreclosure proceedings, any documentation of his attempts to access your assets. I nodded, feeling a strange mix of fear and determination. What about Allison? She's caught in the middle of this. Beatrice's expression softened. That's the most delicate part. She's your daughter, but she's also his wife. Has she given any indication she knows the full extent of their financial problems or what Robert is planning? She admitted they're facing changes at Robert's firm, but she seemed genuinely concerned about my welfare too. I don't think she knows everything. Then there may be an opportunity to reach her. But carefully. Grace, if Robert is desperate enough to consider having his mother-in-law declared incompetent, he might be capable of manipulating Allison against you if he feels threatened. The thought of losing my relationship with my only child made my chest tighten painfully. I won't let that happen, I said with more confidence than I felt. Allison and I have always been close. She'll listen to me if I can get her alone. Perhaps, Beatrice said cautiously. But remember, she's been living with Robert's influence for 15 years, and financial stress can make people behave in ways they normally wouldn't. We spent the next hour outlining a strategy what Beatrice called my protection plan. I would schedule comprehensive medical evaluations, review all my legal documents with Eleanor, document every interaction with Robert, and try to speak with Allison privately. And one more thing, Beatrice added as she packed up her notes. Don't be alone with Robert. Always have someone else present me. Harriet, Dolores, or someone else you trust completely. You think he might? I couldn't finish the sentence. I think desperate people do desperate things, Beatrice said simply. And $47 million is a powerful motivator. After Beatrice left, I sat in Walter's chair, feeling the weight of his absence more acutely than I had in months. He would have known how to handle this situation, how to protect me while preserving Allison's relationship with both her parents. My phone chimed with a text from Robert. Grace, have you had a chance to think about Sunset Meadows? They're pressing for an answer by Friday. I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I called Eleanor. I need your help with something specific, I said when she answered. I want to understand exactly what properties Walter owned, especially in relation to Robert's business. I can bring the full portfolio documentation tomorrow, Eleanor offered. But the short version is that Maple Hill Enterprises Walters Holding Company owns the entire Riverfront Tower where Somerset Financial is headquartered. Somerset's lease comes up for renewal in 3 months. A plan began forming in my mind, not fully developed yet, but the outlines of a strategy that might protect me while giving Allison and Robert a way out of their financial troubles without destroying our family in the process. Eleanor, if I wanted to make changes to Walter's trust to provide for Allison while still protecting the assets from Robert's control, how would we do that? Walter anticipated you might want to do exactly that, Eleanor replied. The trust allows you to create a sub-trust for Allison with specific conditions. We could structure it to provide for her needs while keeping Robert from accessing the principal. And how quickly could we set that up? I could have the paperwork ready within a week. But Grace, are you certain you want to reveal the extent of Walter's estate now? Once that genie is out of the bottle, it will change your relationship with Allison and Robert forever. I'm not certain of anything, I admitted. But I need to be prepared for all possibilities. After hanging up, I finally replied to Robert's text, still considering options. Will let you know by Friday. That evening, as I tended to my garden in the fading light, deadheading the last of the summer roses to encourage a final autumn bloom, I thought about what Walter would do in my situation. He'd been kind but firm, generous but prudent, loving but clear-eyed about people's motivations. Most of all, he'd believed in finding solutions that allowed everyone to maintain their dignity, even those who might not deserve it. As the sun set behind the Japanese maples Walter had planted decades ago, casting long shadows across the garden he'd helped me design. I made my decision. I wouldn't be forced from my home. I wouldn't allow Robert to manipulate Allison or me. But I would find a way to resolve this situation that preserved my daughter's family while protecting the legacy Walter had built. The next morning, I called the Unbreakable Roses to my home for an emergency meeting. If I was going to fight for my independence and my relationship with my daughter, I would need my closest allies by my side. When Harriet, Dolores, and Beatrice arrived, I served tea in Walter's study rather than the sunroom, a signal that this was serious business, not our usual social gathering. "I've discovered something significant," I began, "and I need your help to handle what comes next." I told them everything: Walter's secret fortune, Robert's financial troubles, the pressure to sell my home, and my suspicions about his ultimate intentions. "That sneaky son of a—" Harriet began, but Dolores cut her off with a raised hand. "Let's focus on helping Grace," she said firmly. "What exactly do you need from us? Witnesses, support, advice." I looked at each of them in turn. "And possibly shelter for Allison if things go badly with Robert when everything comes to light." "You know we're with you," Harriet said without hesitation. "But are you sure Walter would want you to use his money to bail out Robert? The man sounds like a financial parasite." "It's not for Robert," I clarified. "It's for Allison and any grandchildren that might come along someday. Walter would want them protected, even if he had reservations about Robert." "And what's your plan for revealing all this?" Beatrice asked practically. "That's where I need your help. I'm meeting Eleanor tomorrow to finalize the subtrust for Allison. After that, I'll try to speak with Allison alone, woman to woman, mother to daughter. If I can make her understand what Robert's been doing—" "And if she doesn't believe you," Dolores asked gently, "or worse, if she already knows and supports his actions?" The question hit me like a physical blow. I hadn't allowed myself to consider that possibility that my daughter might be fully aware of and complicit in Robert's manipulations. "Then I'll have to be prepared to protect myself, even if it means temporary estrangement from Allison," I said, my voice barely steady. "But I have to believe she'll listen. She's Walter's daughter, too." Over the next hour, we refined my strategy. Beatrice would accompany me to all meetings with Eleanor, providing additional legal perspective. Harriet would discreetly research Robert's financial situation through her contacts in the banking industry. Dolores would prepare her guest room in case Allison needed a safe place to stay. As they were leaving, Harriet pulled me aside. "Grace, I'm worried about you. Robert sounds desperate, and desperate men can be dangerous. Please be careful." "I will," I promised, touched by her concern. "But I won't be intimidated in my own home." Later that afternoon, as I was updating my garden journal with notes about fall plantings, my doorbell rang. Through the stained glass panels flanking the front door, I could make out Robert's silhouette. I hesitated, remembering Beatrice's warning about not being alone with him, but sending him away would only escalate tensions. Instead, I called Beatrice quickly. "Robert's at my door. Can you stay on the phone while I speak with him? Just to have a witness." "Absolutely," she agreed immediately. "I'll record the call from my end, if that's all right with you." "Yes, please do." With the phone on speaker in my pocket, I opened the door. "Robert, this is unexpected." He stood on my porch in a business suit, his expression a practiced mask of concern. "Grace, I hope I'm not interrupting anything. I was in the neighborhood and thought I'd check in on you." "I'm fine, thank you. Just working in my garden." "May I come in? There's something important we need to discuss." I hesitated just long enough to make it clear I wasn't entirely comfortable with his presence. "All right, but I can only spare a few minutes. I have a call scheduled soon." In the living room, Robert declined my offer of tea, getting straight to business. "Grace, I've been thinking about our conversation regarding Sunset Meadows. I understand your reluctance to leave your home. It's natural to feel attached to a place with so many memories." "It's more than attachment. Robert, this is my home. I'm happy and independent here." He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a more intimate tone. "The thing is, Grace, Allison and I are concerned that your independence might be compromised in ways you haven't recognized yet." A chill ran through me. What do you mean by compromised? Just small things we've noticed. The unopened mail piling up on your hall table. The confusion you showed at the restaurant when calculating the tip last month. The fact that you sometimes repeat the same stories to Allison within days of each other. Each example was a careful distortion of reality. The unopened mail was catalogs I'd set aside to browse later. The confusion at the restaurant had been me questioning an overcharge on the bill, and I'd repeated a story to Allison because she hadn't appeared to be listening the first time. I'm not confused or forgetful. Robert, I'm perfectly capable of managing my affairs. Of course you believe that, he said with patronizing gentleness. No one wants to acknowledge when their faculties begin to decline. It's why Allison and I think it might be best to have a professional assessment done, just to establish a baseline. A professional assessment, I repeated, my hand instinctively moving to my pocket where Beatrice could hear every word. A neurological workup, memory testing, standard procedure for someone your age. He pulled a business card from his jacket. Dr. Levinson is excellent, very discreet. He could see you next week. I didn't take the card. And if I refuse this assessment, Robert's expression hardened slightly. Grace, this isn't optional. Allison and I have a responsibility to ensure you're properly cared for. If you refuse voluntary evaluation, we might need to pursue other avenues. Other avenues? I echoed. You mean having me declared incompetent against my will? I wouldn't phrase it so dramatically, but yes, if necessary, we would seek guardianship for your protection. In that moment, looking at Robert's determined expression, I realized Beatrice had been right to warn me. This wasn't just about selling my house or accessing what he believed was my modest estate. This was a calculated attempt to take control of my life. I see, I said, keeping my voice steady. And does Allison know you're threatening me with forced guardianship? A flicker of unease crossed his face. Allison understands the necessity of ensuring your welfare. She's finding it emotionally difficult, naturally, but she agrees it's for the best. I wasn't convinced Allison fully understood or supported his plan, but I couldn't be certain. I'll consider the evaluation, I said, wanting to end the conversation before I revealed too much of my hand. But I'll choose my own doctor, not someone you've selected. Grace, Dr. Levinson is a specialist in geriatrics. I said I'll choose my own doctor. Robert, now. I believe it's time for my scheduled call. He stood, clearly frustrated by my resistance, but unwilling to push further at this point. Think carefully about this. Grace, Allison is very concerned. We both want what's best for you. I know what's best for me, I replied firmly. And it's not being declared incompetent by my son-in-law. After showing Robert out, I pulled the phone from my pocket. Did you get all that, Beatrice? Every word, she confirmed, her voice tight with anger. He's laying groundwork for a competency challenge. Classic manipulation tactics. He's going to move quickly now that I've pushed back, I predicted. We need to accelerate our plan. Agreed. I'll call Eleanor and see if we can meet first thing tomorrow. And Grace. Don't be alone in that house tonight. Would you like to stay with me? No, I said, looking around at the home Walter and I had built together. I won't be driven from my home by fear, but perhaps you could stay here. The guest room is always ready. I'll be there in an hour, Beatrice promised, with reinforcements. By nightfall, my house had become command central for what Harriet jokingly called Operation Protect Grace. Beatrice occupied the guest room. Harriet sat up on the living room sofa, and Dolores insisted on taking the first watch while the rest of us slept. As I lay in bed that night, listening to the occasional creak of floorboards as Dolores patrolled the hallway, I felt a strange mixture of fear, determination, and gratitude. Fear of what Robert might attempt next. Determination to protect myself and help Allison, and overwhelming gratitude for friends who would stand guard through the night rather than leave me vulnerable. Walter, I whispered into the darkness, I wish you were here, but I think you'd be proud of me. I'm finally finding the strength you always said I had. Tomorrow would bring my confrontation with Eleanor and the creation of Allison's trust. After that would come the most difficult conversation of all, telling my daughter the truth about her husband's plans and her father's fortune. As I drifted toward sleep, I found myself remembering something Walter had often said when facing difficult decisions. The truth may not be comfortable, Grace, but in the end, it's the only solid ground we have to stand on. I'll now continue with part 2 of Grace's final autumn, aiming for approximately 6,000 words. Morning light filtered through the stained glass transom above my bedroom door, painting watercolor patterns across my quilt. For a moment, I lay perfectly still, listening to the sounds of my house creaking floorboards, the distant murmur of voices, the gentle hum of the furnace fighting off autumn's chill. My friends had stayed the night, guarding me like sentinels from a threat I never imagined I'd face in my later years, my own son-in-law. I found Dolores in the kitchen, methodically arranging fresh fruit on a platter. "Good morning," she said, looking up with a smile that didn't quite hide her concern. "I hope you slept." "Better than expected," I admitted, reaching for the coffee pot. "Where are Harriet and Beatrice?" "Harriet's showering. Beatrice left at dawn something about court records she wanted to check before your meeting with Eleanor." The kitchen door swung open as Harriet entered, her silver hair still damp, wrapped in one of my guest robes. "Morning, warriors," she announced. "What's our battle plan for today?" Despite everything, I laughed. "You're enjoying this far too much, Harriet." "Well, it beats our usual book club discussions. No offense to Jane Austen, but this has real stakes." She helped herself to coffee. "Besides, Robert has officially made my people who deserve what's coming to them list." "He's still Allison's husband," I reminded her gently. "Whatever we do needs to leave room for reconciliation for her sake." Harriet's expression softened. "Of course, family first. But that doesn't mean we can't enjoy watching him squirm a little when he realizes he's messed with the wrong widow." We gathered around the kitchen island, reviewing the day's agenda over breakfast. Eleanor would arrive at 10 to finalize the trust documents. At noon, I had an appointment with my longtime physician, Dr. Watkins, for a complete physical and cognitive assessment. And at 3, I planned to call Allison and invite her for tea alone. "What if she brings Robert?" Dolores asked, practical as always. "Then I'll reschedule," I said firmly. "This conversation needs to be between mother and daughter." Beatrice returned just before Eleanor was due to arrive, carrying a leather portfolio and wearing a satisfied expression. "Public records are a wonderful thing," she announced, placing the portfolio on the kitchen table. "I've compiled documentation of the foreclosure proceedings on Robert and Allison's home, 3 missed mortgage payments, formal notice of default filed last month." She spread several documents across the table. "And here's where it gets interesting. Robert has taken out 3 personal loans in the past year, each larger than the last. The most recent was denied. He's also maxed out 4 credit cards and taken a second mortgage on their vacation property in Vermont. He's drowning in debt," I murmured, scanning the papers. "No wonder he's desperate to get his hands on my house." "There's more," Beatrice continued. "I have a contact at the State Securities Division who owes me a favor. Somerset Financial Roberts' firm is under confidential investigation for potential regulatory violations. Nothing public yet, but there are whispers about improper handling of client funds." The implications were staggering. Robert wasn't just facing personal financial trouble. His professional reputation and career might be at stake as well. "Poor Allison," I said softly. "I wonder how much she knows." The doorbell rang, announcing Eleanor's arrival. Always punctual, dressed in a tailored navy suit, she carried a leather briefcase that looked like it cost more than most people's monthly mortgage payments. "I see the cavalry has arrived," she observed dryly, noting my 3 friends hovering protectively. "Grace's personal security detail," Harriet quipped. "Robert dropped by unannounced yesterday with some thinly veiled threats about guardianship proceedings." Eleanor's expression hardened. "Then we're right to accelerate our timeline. Shall we get to work?" We settled in Walter's study, a fitting location for decisions about his legacy. Eleanor laid out several documents on the desk, each with yellow tabs indicating where signatures would be needed. "I've prepared everything as we discussed," she began. "The Allison Sullivan Harper Trust will be funded with $5 million initially, structured as a spendthrift trust to protect the assets from creditors including, if necessary, her husband." "What exactly does that mean?" I asked. "It means Allison can receive income and distributions from the trust, but creditors can't reach the principal. If she and Robert divorce, the trust assets aren't considered marital property. And most importantly, Robert cannot access the funds directly under any circumstances. I nodded, relieved. And Allison will have enough to be secure, even if things with Robert fall apart. More than secure, Eleanor confirmed. The trust is designed to provide approximately $250,000 annually without touching the principal. Additionally, there are specific provisions for health care, education, and housing. Housing, I repeated. So if they lose their home to foreclosure, the trust could purchase a reasonable residence for Allison's use, Eleanor finished. Not the 5-bedroom showplace they currently have, but a comfortable home in a good neighborhood. I studied the documents, the legal language swimming before my eyes. And this protects her without giving Robert control. Precisely. You'll serve as the initial trustee. With Beatrice as successor trustee if anything happens to you, Allison can become co-trustee when she turns 50, giving her more direct control while maintaining the creditor protections. It's elegant, Beatrice commented, reviewing the paperwork. Walter would approve. I took a deep breath and signed where indicated each signature a step toward protecting my daughter while thwarting Robert's manipulations. There's one more thing, Eleanor said, pulling out a final document. I've prepared paperwork to transfer ownership of Riverfront Tower from Maple Hill Enterprises directly to you. Once that's complete, you'll officially be Robert's landlord. The irony wasn't lost on any of us. What happens when Somerset Financial's lease comes up for renewal in 3 months? I asked. That will be entirely up to you, Eleanor replied with the faintest hint of a smile. As owner, you could offer to renew under the current terms, increase the rent, or decline to renew at all. Powerful leverage, Beatrice murmured. Indeed, Eleanor agreed. Though I recommend waiting to reveal your ownership until absolutely necessary. Sometimes the most powerful card is the one still held in your hand. After Eleanor left with the signed documents, promising to file everything immediately, we gathered in the kitchen to regroup. I feel like we should have code names, Harriet suggested, only half joking. This is turning into a proper espionage operation. Let's not get carried away, Dolores cautioned. We're protecting Grace, not overthrowing a government. Although, Beatrice interjected, a bit of surveillance might not be a bad idea. Robert struck me as the type who might try to help Grace pack up or accidentally discard important documents if given the opportunity. You think he'd break in? I asked, alarmed. Not break in, necessarily, but he is family. He could claim he was checking on you if questioned. It might be prudent to have someone here when you're not, at least for now. The Unbreakable Roses Security Service, Harriet declared with a dramatic flourish. We'll take shifts. I call dibs on the evening watch. I bring my own wine. Despite the gravity of the situation, I found myself laughing. What would I do without you all? Let's hope you never have to find out, Dolores said, squeezing my hand. My appointment with Dr. Watkins went exactly as expected. After a thorough physical examination and a standardized cognitive assessment, he declared me to be in remarkable health for any age, let alone 68. Your blood pressure is better than mine, he noted, reviewing my results. Cognitive function tests show above-average performance, no signs of memory issues or executive function decline. He looked up from his notes. May I ask why you suddenly needed such comprehensive testing? You've always been the picture of health. Grace. I hesitated, then decided honesty was best. Family concerns. My son-in-law has suggested I might be experiencing cognitive decline. Dr. Watkins frowned. Based on what symptoms? Apparently, I sometimes repeat stories and get confused about financial matters. Grace, I've been your physician for 20 years. If you were experiencing cognitive decline, I'd have noticed signs during our regular appointments. He tapped his pen against his notepad. Would you like me to document my findings formally? Something beyond the usual chart notes. Yes, please, as detailed as possible. He nodded, understanding dawning in his eyes. I see. This is about more than health concerns, isn't it? Let's just say I'm being cautious. Well, you can be cautious with confidence. You're healthier than most of my patients decades younger. He began typing into his computer. I'll prepare a comprehensive report affirming your cognitive health and decision-making capacity. Should I send a copy to anyone besides you? My attorney, Eleanor Winters, and perhaps one to Beatrice Holcomb as well. Back at home, I found Harriet in my garden, surprisingly not snooping but actually weeding my perennial beds with unexpected skill. "I didn't know you gardened," I remarked, joining her among the autumn blooms. "Hidden talents," she replied with a wink. "How is the doctor? Clean bill of health, as expected. He's sending formal documentation to Eleanor and Beatrice." "Excellent. One more shield against Robert's machinations." She sat back on her heels, brushing dirt from her hands. "Now comes the hard part. Allison." I nodded, dreading the conversation ahead. "I've texted her to come for tea tomorrow, alone. And if she insists on bringing Robert, then I'll know exactly where things stand." I sighed, looking out across the garden Walter and I had nurtured for decades. "But I have to believe she'll come. She's always confided in me, even after marrying Robert." Harriet's expression softened. "She's lucky to have you fighting for her, even when she doesn't realize she needs it." "That's what mothers do," I said simply. To my relief, Allison replied quickly to my invitation. "Just me. Everything okay will be there at 4. I spent the evening preparing, not just the physical tea service with Walter's mother's china and the lemon squares Allison had loved since childhood, but mentally rehearsing how to tell my daughter that her husband was planning to have me declared incompetent while hiding their financial problems from me. The next afternoon, I was arranging flowers in the sitting room when Beatrice arrived, dressed in one of her courtroom suits. "I thought you might want backup," she explained. "Not to intrude on your conversation with Allison, but to be present in the house. Just in case." I was touched by her thoughtfulness. "Thank you. You can work in Walter's study if you don't mind. Within earshot, but not hovering." "Perfect. And Grace, remember, no matter how this goes, you're doing the right thing. For yourself and for Allison." At precisely 4 o'clock, Allison's car pulled into the driveway. I watched from the window as she sat for a moment, checking her appearance in the rearview mirror before exiting a habit she'd had since teenage years. When I opened the door, her expression was a mixture of concern and curiosity. "Mom, what's going on? Your text seemed serious." "Nothing to worry about," I assured her, accepting her quick hug. "I just thought we should have some time together, mother and daughter." In the sitting room, Allison's eyes widened at the formal tea setting. "Grandma Sullivan's Wedgwood. Now I know something's up. You only use that for special occasions." "This is special," I said, pouring tea into the delicate cups. "It's not every day I get my daughter all to myself anymore." Allison smiled, but her eyes remained wary. "Robert mentioned he stopped by yesterday. He said you seemed upset." "I was," I admitted, deciding directness was best. "Allison, Robert told me that if I didn't agree to a neurological evaluation with his chosen doctor, you both would seek guardianship over me. That's a significant threat." Her face paled. "He said that I knew he wanted you to see a doctor, but not that he threatened legal action." "Then you didn't authorize him to take such steps." "No, Mom. I'm worried about you living alone in this big house. Yes, and sometimes you seem a little forgetful. But I would never agree to forcing you into anything." Relief washed over me. Allison hadn't been part of Robert's more extreme plans. "I appreciate your concern, sweetheart, but I'm not experiencing cognitive decline. I had a complete evaluation with Dr. Watkins yesterday, physical and cognitive. I'm in excellent health." "You did? That's good." She looked down at her teacup. I worry. Mom, Dad's been gone 3 years, and you're here all alone." "I'm not alone," I corrected gently. "I have my friends, my garden club, my YouTube channel viewers. I have a full life." Allison nodded, still not meeting my eyes. "I know. It's just, Robert says this house is becoming a financial burden. The maintenance, the property taxes. He thinks selling now would give you security for the future." Here it was the opening I needed. "Allison, I need to ask you something important, and I need you to be honest with me." I reached across the table to take her hand. "Are you and Robert having financial problems?" Her head snapped up, eyes wide with alarm. Why would you ask that?" "Because his sudden concern about my financial security seems at odds with his previous lack of interest in my welfare. And because I accidentally saw a foreclosure notice that fell from his jacket at lunch last week. Tears welled in her eyes. You weren't supposed to know, she whispered. We were handling it. By selling my house, a tear slipped down her cheek. It wasn't like that. Not exactly, Robert thought. He thought it would solve both problems at once. You'd be safer in a managed community, and the proceeds from the house would help us get back on our feet, while leaving me with barely enough to cover Sunset Meadows' exorbitant fees, I added quietly. Is it really that expensive? She asked, looking genuinely shocked. Robert said it was reasonable. The entrance fee alone is $350,000 with monthly fees over $5,000. Do you know what that would leave me with after selling this house? She shook her head. Very little, especially after Robert's suggested renovations to make it more marketable. I would eventually run out of money. Allison, he wouldn't let that happen, she insisted, though her voice lacked conviction. He's just trying to help everyone. Sweetheart, I need you to listen carefully. Robert hasn't been honest with you about your financial situation or his plans for me. The foreclosure is further along than you probably realize. He's taken out multiple personal loans, and now he's attempting to have me declared incompetent so he can control my assets. No, she shook her head vehemently. He wouldn't do that. He's worried about you. That's all. Allison, I've seen the documentation. Beatrice pulled the public records. I squeezed her hand. But more importantly, I need to tell you something that changes everything. Something about your father. Her expression shifted from denial to confusion. Dad? What about him? Taking a deep breath. I told her about Walter's secret fortune, the patents, the investments, the properties. Her face registered shock, then disbelief, then a complex mixture of emotions I couldn't fully decipher. $47 million, she repeated incredulously. Dad left you $47 million that no one knew about. Yes. And he left specific provisions to protect it and you from anyone who might try to exploit the situation. Like Robert. You mean... Her voice had turned flat. Like anyone who might not have your best interests at heart. I corrected gently. Allison, your father loved you more than anything in this world. Everything he did, including keeping this fortune separate from our daily lives, was to protect our family's values and happiness. She was silent for a long moment, staring into her teacup as if it might contain answers. Why are you telling me this now? Because I've created a trust in your name, $5 million, structured to provide for you regardless of what happens with Robert. A safety net your father would have wanted you to have. A safety net, she repeated slowly. In case I leave Robert. That's what you mean, isn't it? In case of anything, I clarified. Economic downturns, health crises, or yes, changes in your marriage. The money is yours, Allison. Not Robert's, not mine. Yours. She set down her cup with a clatter. This is overwhelming. Dad had this secret life, this fortune. You've known for days and created trusts. And Robert, her voice broke. Robert was planning to have you declared incompetent. It's too much. I know, I acknowledged softly. And I'm sorry to burden you with all of it at once, but Robert's threats have forced my hand. What am I supposed to do with this information? She asked, vulnerability evident in her voice. Just leave my husband, the father of my... She stopped abruptly, her hand flying to her mouth. Allison, I prompted gently. The father of your what? She closed her eyes briefly, then looked at me with a mixture of joy and fear. I'm pregnant, Mom. 12 weeks. We've been trying for years, and it finally happened. And now everything is falling apart. My heart swelled with conflicting emotions, elation at the prospect of a grandchild, dismay at the timing, concern for my daughter caught in such a difficult position. Oh, Allison. I moved to sit beside her, pulling her into an embrace. That's wonderful news. A baby changes things, but it doesn't mean we can't find a solution that works for everyone. She clung to me like she had as a child after a nightmare. I don't know what to do. I love Robert, despite his flaws. But what you're saying, if it's true, it is true, I confirmed softly. But that doesn't mean there isn't a path forward. One that protects you, your baby. And yes, even gives Robert a chance to redeem himself. She pulled back to look at me. What do you mean? I mean that I have no desire to destroy your family. I just won't allow Robert to sacrifice my well-being for his financial schemes. I tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, a maternal gesture I'd been making since she was small. There's something else you should know. Your father owned the building where Robert's company has its offices. What? Her eyes widened in disbelief. Riverfront Tower. It's mine now. Somerset Financial's lease comes up for renewal in 3 months. Understanding dawned in her eyes. So I could choose not to renew their lease. Yes, but I'd rather use that leverage constructively, to encourage better choices, not punish past mistakes. Allison was quiet for a long moment, processing everything. I need time to think, she finally said, to figure out what to do. This is all so unbelievable. Of course, I agreed, relieved she hadn't immediately rejected everything I'd told her. Take all the time you need. The trust is set up. You're protected, no matter what happens next. Does Robert know about any of this? No, and I'd prefer to be the one to tell him. When the time is right. When I'm fully prepared. She nodded slowly. What will you say to him? That depends largely on his next move. I squeezed her hand. Allison, I need you to promise me something. Don't tell him about the trust or your father's fortune yet. Not until we've had a chance to decide together how to handle this. You're asking me to keep secrets from my husband. I'm asking you to delay sharing information that could cause him to make rash decisions. For everyone's protection, including his. She hesitated, then nodded. All right, I won't say anything yet. But Mom, I can't keep this secret forever. Especially now. With the baby coming. I know, and we won't have to. I smiled reassuringly. We'll find a way through this that preserves your family and your future. I promise. After Allison left, visibly shaken, but at least open to what I'd told her, I found Beatrice in Walter's study. I heard most of it, she admitted. The walls in this old house aren't exactly soundproof. And I prompted, collapsing into Walter's chair. And I think you handled it perfectly. You told her the truth without forcing her to choose sides immediately. You offered protection without demanding she leave Robert. Beatrice leaned forward. But Grace, you know Robert won't give up easily, especially once he realizes Allison is wavering. I know, I sighed, suddenly feeling every one of my 68 years. That's why we need to be ready for whatever comes next. The unbreakable roses remain at your service, Beatrice said with a small smile. Now, should we call Harriet and Dolores to update them? Harriet will be disappointed she missed the drama. Yes, I agreed, reaching for the phone. But first, I need a moment to process something Allison told me. I looked up at Beatrice, a smile spreading across my face despite the day's tensions. I'm going to be a grandmother. 2 days passed without word from either Allison or Robert, an ominous silence that left me constantly checking my phone and jumping at every sound. The unbreakable roses maintained their protective vigil, with at least one friend staying at the house at all times. No news is good news, Dolores insisted as we deadheaded the last of the autumn roses together. It means Allison is thinking carefully about what you told her. Or it means Robert is plotting his next move, Harriet countered, snipping a bloom for the kitchen table. Men like him don't surrender easily. Either way, I said, straightening to ease my back. We need to be prepared. On the third morning, Eleanor called with updates. The trust documents have been filed and are now active. I've also transferred ownership of Riverfront Tower to you personally rather than through Maple Hill Enterprises. The paperwork should be complete by the end of the week. Thank you, Eleanor. Have you heard anything about Robert or Somerset Financial? As a matter of fact, yes. My contact at the securities division says the investigation is accelerating. There are discrepancies in client accounts that can't be easily explained. Nothing public yet, but the regulators are concerned. I frowned, troubled by the implications. Could Robert be misappropriating client funds? It's possible, Eleanor admitted, or it could be sloppy record-keeping. Either way, it's another pressure point he's facing. After hanging up, I retreated to Walter's study, seeking solace in the space where his presence still felt strongest. The morning light streamed through the leaded glass windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air and the leather spines of his beloved books. "What would you do, Walter?" I asked the empty room. "How would you handle a man willing to have your wife declared incompetent to save himself financially?" No answer came, of course, but as I ran my fingers along the shelf of his first editions, I remembered something Walter had often said about difficult people. Everyone has a story they tell themselves to justify their actions. Understanding that story is the first step to changing their behavior. What story was Robert telling himself that he was protecting me while solving his financial problems, that the ends justified the means, or something darker, that I was an old woman whose needs were less important than his ambitions? My phone chimed with a text from Allison. "Need to talk, you coming over at 1 alone." A mixture of hope and apprehension filled me. Had she made a decision? Confronted Robert. Or was she coming to tell me she didn't believe my warnings? I spent the next hours in nervous preparation, not just the practical aspects of tea and privacy. Beatrice agreed to make herself scarce, but remain in the house, but mentally girding myself for whatever Allison might say. When she arrived, the shadows under her eyes and her subdued manner told me immediately that something significant had happened. "Allison, are you all right?" She shook her head, following me to the sitting room. "Not really. I've been doing some investigating of my own." Once settled with tea, she wouldn't touch. She continued. "After our talk, I couldn't just accept everything at face value. I needed to see for myself." "Of course," I nodded. "What did you find?" "First, I called Dr. Watkins. He confirmed you're in perfect health, mentally and physically." She twisted her wedding ring, a nervous habit she'd developed shortly after marrying Robert. "Then I went through our financial papers while Robert was at work. Mom, it's worse than you said. We're not just facing foreclosure on the house. There are credit card bills I never knew about. Loans from people I've never heard of." Her voice quavered. "And I found draft paperwork for a competency hearing against you, already prepared, with affidavits from a Dr. Levinson I've never met, stating you showed signs of cognitive impairment during an examination that never happened." I felt a chill despite the warm room. He was fabricating evidence. "It appears so." Tears welled in her eyes. "How could he do this to you, to us?" I moved to sit beside her on the sofa, taking her trembling hands in mine. People in desperate situations sometimes make choices they would never normally consider. Robert is facing professional disgrace, financial ruin, and the collapse of the image he's cultivated. He's terrified. "That doesn't excuse what he was planning," she said, an edge of anger in her voice. "No, it doesn't," I agreed. "But understanding his desperation might help us find a solution that doesn't completely destroy your family." Allison's expression softened slightly. "You're being remarkably charitable toward the man who was planning to have you institutionalized." "I'm being practical," I corrected. "You're carrying his child, my grandchild. That creates a permanent connection, regardless of what happens with your marriage." She placed a protective hand over her still flat stomach. "I haven't told him about the baby yet. After finding those papers, I couldn't bring myself to share something so precious." "Oh, Allison." My heart ached for her impossible position. "I've been staying with my friend Jennifer since yesterday," she continued. "I told Robert I needed space to think about our financial situation. He doesn't know I found the guardianship paperwork." "What do you want to do?" I asked gently. She looked at me with a mixture of determination and fear. "I want to understand exactly what's happening with Robert's business, the extent of his deception, before I make any permanent decisions." "Eleanor mentioned the Securities Division is investigating Somerset Financial. There may be irregularities with client accounts." Allison closed her eyes briefly. "Perfect. So he might be facing criminal charges on top of everything else." "We don't know that yet," I cautioned. "But it would explain his increasing desperation." "What should I do, Mom?" she asked, suddenly sounding very young. "Stay with him and try to work through this. Leave now before things get worse. I'm carrying his child. But I don't even know who he is anymore." The weight of her question hung in the air between us. This wasn't just about protecting myself anymore. It was about guiding my daughter through perhaps the most difficult decision of her life. I can't answer that for you, I said carefully. But I can promise that whatever you decide, you'll have support financially, emotionally, practically. The trust I've established ensures you and your child will never be without resources. Even if I stay with Robert, even then, the money is yours, structured to protect it from creditors or misuse. Your father wanted you to have choices. Allison, real choices, not decisions forced by financial necessity. She nodded slowly. I need to confront Robert. Ask him directly about the guardianship papers, the hidden debts, all of it. See if there's anything left worth saving. If that's what you want to do, I'll support you. But please, be careful. Have the conversation in a public place. Don't put yourself at risk. You think he might... She couldn't finish the sentence. I think desperate people sometimes make terrible choices, I said carefully. And Robert is very desperate right now. After Allison left, promising to stay with her friend Jennifer until she'd sorted things out, I called an emergency meeting of the Unbreakable Roses. Within an hour, all three had assembled in Walter's study, listening intently as I recounted Allison's discoveries. Fabricating medical evidence. Beatrice looked appalled. That crosses the line from unethical to potentially criminal. Not to mention the securities investigation, Harriet added. Our Robert's been a very busy boy. The question is, what's his next move? Dolores asked practically. Now that Allison's found the guardianship papers and left, he must realize his plan is falling apart. He'll escalate, Beatrice predicted grimly. Men like Robert don't abandon their goals. They just find more extreme methods when conventional approaches fail. Which means we need to be prepared for anything, I concluded, including the possibility that he might try to force the issue somehow. Harriet leaned forward, unusually serious. Grace, maybe you should consider staying somewhere else for a few days, just until we know what Robert plans to do next. I shook my head firmly. No, I won't be driven from my home by fear. Besides, running away would only reinforce any narrative Robert might create about my inability to care for myself. Then we'll need to be extra vigilant, Beatrice decided. I'll stay here tonight. Harriet, can you take tomorrow? Absolutely. I'll bring my binoculars. Always wanted to try my hand at surveillance. This isn't a game, Harriet, Dolores chided gently. No, but it helps to keep our spirits up, Harriet countered. Grace needs allies who are alert and positive, not mired in doom and gloom. As they continued planning a protection schedule, my phone rang a number I didn't recognize. Grace Sullivan speaking. Mrs. Sullivan, this is Detective James Morales with the Willow Creek Police Department. I'm calling about a report we've received expressing concern for your welfare. My blood ran cold. What kind of report? Your son-in-law, Robert Harper, has requested a welfare check. He states that you've been exhibiting signs of confusion and paranoia, making accusations against family members, and refusing medical attention. I closed my eyes briefly, anger and disbelief washing over me. I see. And what would this welfare check entail? Detective, standard procedure would be for an officer to visit your residence, speak with you, and determine if there's any cause for concern. Beatrice, sensing something was wrong, moved closer. I put the phone on speaker so everyone could hear. Detective Morales, I'm perfectly fine. In fact, I've recently had a complete physical and cognitive assessment with my physician, Dr. Thomas Watkins. I'd be happy to have him forward his report to your department. That would be helpful, he acknowledged. However, we still need to follow up on the report with an in-person visit. It's procedure. Of course. When would this visit take place? An officer could come by tomorrow morning, around 10. That would be fine. I'll have my attorney present as well, if that's acceptable. There was a slight pause. Your attorney? Yes, given that this welfare check was initiated by someone who has recently threatened me with guardianship proceedings. I believe having legal representation present is prudent. Another pause. I understand. 10 tomorrow. Then, after hanging up, I looked at my friends' concerned faces. Robert's trying to use the police to establish a record of mental health concerns. Clever, Beatrice admitted grudgingly. A police welfare check creates an official record, which could later be used in guardianship proceedings. But it won't work, Harriet insisted. You're obviously fine, and you've got Dr. Watkins' report to prove it. Plus 3 witnesses who can attest to your mental clarity, Dolores added. And me as legal counsel, Beatrice finished. Roberts overplayed his hand. This welfare check will backfire on him. I nodded, trying to feel as confident as they sounded. Let's hope so. In the meantime, I should warn Allison that Robert's escalating the situation. My text to Allison was brief. Robert has requested a police welfare check at my house tomorrow. I'm fine. Everything's handled. But you should know he's taking more aggressive steps. Her reply came almost immediately. OMG, Mom. I'm so sorry. Meeting Robert for coffee in an hour to talk. We'll let you know how it goes. Please be careful, I texted back, wishing I could protect her from the confrontation ahead. The rest of the day passed in tense preparation. Beatrice helped me gather all relevant documentation, Dr. Watkins' report, the trust paperwork, evidence of Robert's financial troubles, and the transfer of Riverfront Towers ownership. Dolores prepared a hearty dinner none of us had much appetite for. Harriet kept watch by the windows, half expecting Robert to appear at any moment. You know, Harriet mused as evening fell, I've been thinking about Robert's background. What do we actually know about him before he met Allison? Not much, I admitted. He grew up in Ohio, I believe. Modest background. His father worked in a factory. His mother was a homemaker. He was the first in his family to attend college, on scholarship. The classic self-made man narrative, Beatrice nodded. It explains a lot about his focus on status and appearance, and his desperation not to lose everything he's built, I added softly. In his mind, returning to his origins would be the ultimate failure. That doesn't excuse what he's doing, Dolores said firmly. No, I agreed. But as Walter always said, understanding someone's story helps you predict their next chapter. Around 9, my phone rang again, Allison. Mom, her voice was shaky. I just finished talking with Robert. Are you all right? Where are you? I'm fine. Back at Jennifer's. It was intense. What happened? She took an audible breath. I confronted him about everything, the hidden debts, the foreclosure, the guardianship papers. At first, he denied it all, said I was being manipulated by you and your friends. And then I showed him copies I'd made of the guardianship paperwork. He changed, became very quiet, very controlled, said he was only trying to protect everyone's future, including yours. Did you tell him about the baby? I asked gently. No. It didn't feel safe somehow. The way he was looking at me, she paused. Mom. I've never seen that expression on his face before, like he was calculating something. A chill ran through me. What did you decide about your marriage? I told him I needed time apart to think, that I'd be staying with Jennifer for at least a week. Her voice strengthened slightly. I also told him that if he took any further actions against you, including the police welfare check, I would be forced to reconsider our entire relationship. How did he respond? He said I was being hysterical, that I didn't understand the pressure he was under, that sometimes difficult choices had to be made for the greater good. She sighed heavily. When I left, he was on the phone, though I couldn't hear who with. Allison, I'm proud of you for standing your ground. But please, be extra careful. Don't go home alone, even to get more clothes. Have Jennifer or someone else go with you. I will. And Mom, I love you. I'm sorry about all of this. You have nothing to apologize for. Sweetheart, we'll get through this together. After hanging up, I shared the conversation with my friends, who had been listening anxiously. Robert's cornered, Beatrice observed. Allison knows the truth. His financial house of cards is collapsing, and his plan to access your assets is unraveling. That makes him unpredictable. And dangerous, Harriet added grimly. Grace, I really think you should consider staying elsewhere tonight. I shook my head firmly. No, I need to be here for the police visit tomorrow. Running would only support Robert's narrative that something's wrong with me. Then we're staying too, Dolores declared. All of us. Slumber party at Grace's. Despite my protests that one friend on guard was sufficient, they were adamant. Harriet claimed the guest room she'd used previously. Dolores sat up on the living room sofa, and Beatrice insisted on a makeshift bed in Walter's study to protect the legal documents, she claimed, though we all knew she was positioning herself near the most vulnerable entry points. As I prepared for bed that night, I found myself drawn to the window, looking out at the moonlit garden Walter and I had created together. Somewhere out there, Robert was plotting his next move. My son-in-law, who had seemed so perfect on paper when Allison first brought him home, ambitious, well-spoken, attentive. How had we all missed the ruthlessness beneath the polished exterior? We see what we want to see. Walter had once observed after a faculty dinner where a colleague's charming spouse had later been revealed as abusive, especially when the alternative disrupts our hope for those we love. We had wanted Allison to have found happiness, security, love. And so we had seen in Robert the qualities that would provide those things, overlooking the warning signs that might have revealed his true character earlier. Now, 15 years later, I was fighting not just for my own independence, but for my daughter's future and my unborn grandchild's well-being. The stakes couldn't be higher. I won't let him win. Walter, I whispered to the night. Not when there's so much at risk. Sleep came fitfully, interrupted by creaking floorboards as my friends took turns patrolling the house, and dreams where Robert loomed over me with papers declaring me incompetent, while Allison watched helplessly from behind glass I couldn't break. Morning arrived with golden autumn light and the comforting aroma of coffee brewing Dolores, already up and preparing for the day ahead. I dressed carefully in a conservative blue dress and Walter's mother's pearl necklace, an outfit that projected both dignity and tradition. "Ready for your close-up with Willow Creek's finest," Harriet quipped as I entered the kitchen, though the tension around her eyes belied her light tone. "As ready as I'll ever be," I replied, accepting the coffee Dolores offered. "Any sign of Robert?" "Not yet," Beatrice reported, looking up from her legal pad where she'd been making notes. "But the day is young." At precisely 10 o'clock, the doorbell rang. Through the stained glass panels, I could make out two figures on my porch, one in the unmistakable dark blue of a police uniform. Beatrice stood beside me as I opened the door to face whatever Robert had set in motion. I'll now continue with part 3 of Grace's Final Autumn, aiming for approximately 4,000 words to complete the story. I opened my front door to find a female police officer with kind eyes and a serious expression, accompanied by a man in a tweed jacket who introduced himself as Detective Morales. "Mrs. Sullivan, I'm Officer Chen, and this is Detective Morales. We're here about the welfare check that was requested." "Yes, I've been expecting you," I replied calmly. "Please come in. This is my attorney, Beatrice Holcomb." Beatrice stepped forward with professional composure. "Officer Detective, I understand you're just doing your job, but I want to note for the record that this welfare check was requested by someone who has a direct financial interest in questioning my client's competence." Detective Morales' eyebrows rose slightly. "That's a serious allegation, Ms. Holcomb." "One we can substantiate," Beatrice replied smoothly. "But first, please come in and speak with Mrs. Sullivan. I believe that will address any legitimate concerns." I led them to the sitting room where Harriet and Dolores had discreetly made themselves scarce, though I knew they were within earshot. "Mrs. Sullivan," Officer Chen began once we were seated, "your son-in-law has expressed concern about your welfare. He mentioned you've been exhibiting unusual behavior, refusing medical care, making accusations against family members, and potentially experiencing memory issues. We're just here to make sure you're all right." I smiled politely. "I appreciate your concern, Officer. However, I'm in excellent health, both physically and mentally. I had a complete examination with Dr. Thomas Watkins just days ago, who found no concerns whatsoever." I nodded to Beatrice, who produced a folder. "Here's Dr. Watkins's comprehensive report," Beatrice said, handing it to Detective Morales. "As you can see, it specifically addresses cognitive function and decision-making capacity, finding Mrs. Sullivan to be above average for her age group in all measures." Detective Morales scanned the document, his expression neutral. "This appears quite thorough. May I ask why such comprehensive testing was done recently?" "Because my son-in-law, Robert Harper, has been attempting to have me declared incompetent in order to gain control of my assets," I stated calmly. He's facing foreclosure on his home and significant financial troubles of his own. Officer Chen's eyes widened slightly. That's not what Mr. Harper indicated in his report. I imagine it wasn't, I agreed. Detective, would you like to see the draft guardianship papers my daughter discovered in Robert's desk? The ones including fabricated medical testimony from a doctor I've never met. You have these documents, Detective Morales asked, his professional demeanor giving way to genuine interest. Beatrice produced another folder. Copies only. Mrs. Sullivan's daughter has the originals. As you'll see, they include affidavits from a Dr. Levinson claiming to have examined Mrs. Sullivan and found cognitive impairment in examination that never took place. The officers exchanged glances as they reviewed the papers. This is concerning, Detective Morales admitted. Falsifying medical records would be a serious offense. There's more, Beatrice continued. Mr. Harper is facing foreclosure on his home, has maxed out multiple credit cards, and his investment firm is under investigation by securities regulators. His sudden concern for Mrs. Sullivan coincides with his discovery that her home could be sold for a substantial sum. Officer Chen turned to me with a gentler expression. Mrs. Sullivan, do you feel safe in your home? Are you concerned Mr. Harper might take more extreme actions? The question hung in the air for a moment as I considered how to respond. I believe Robert is desperate. Officer Chen, desperate people sometimes make poor choices, but I have friends staying with me, and I've taken legal precautions to protect myself. I see. She made a note in her small pad. Based on what we've seen here, there's clearly no cause for concern about your welfare, quite the opposite. Would you like to file a report about the falsified medical documents? I glanced at Beatrice, who gave a slight nod. Yes, I believe that would be prudent. Not to punish Robert, but to create an official record in case he attempts something similar in the future. Detective Morales stood. We'll need statements from you and your daughter about these documents. In the meantime, I suggest you continue your current precautions. If Mr. Harper attempts to contact you in a way that makes you uncomfortable, don't hesitate to call us. Thank you, Detective. I appreciate your thoroughness. As they prepared to leave, Officer Chen paused. Mrs. Sullivan, your garden is beautiful. My grandmother would have loved those Japanese maples. I smiled, genuinely touched by the personal observation. Thank you. My husband planted them many years ago. They're at their most beautiful in autumn. After the officers left, Harriet and Dolores emerged from the kitchen where they'd been eavesdropping. That went better than expected, Harriet declared, giving me a quick hug. Much better, Beatrice agreed. Robert's plan has backfired. Now there's an official police record of his attempt to falsify medical evidence. I sank into Walter's chair, suddenly exhausted by the tension of the encounter. What do you think he'll do next? He's running out of options, Beatrice mused. The police welfare check failed. Allison knows the truth. His financial problems are mounting, which makes him more dangerous, not less, Dolores cautioned. My phone chimed with a text from Allison. How did it go with the police? I quickly replied. Fine. They saw a doctor's report and documentation, actually filing report against Robert for falsified medical records. Are you safe? Her response came immediately. Yes, still at Jennifer's. Robert keeps calling, getting more desperate. Don't meet with him alone, I texted back. Keep someone with you at all times. The rest of the day passed in uneasy calm. Harriet and Dolores maintained their protective presence while Beatrice worked on additional legal precautions. I tried to focus on normal activities, updating my garden journal, reviewing comments on my latest YouTube video, preparing dinner for my friends, but Robert's shadow hung over everything. Just after dinner, as dusk was settling over the garden, the doorbell rang. Through the stained glass panels, I could make out Robert's silhouette. It's him, I whispered to Beatrice, who was closest. We expected this, she replied calmly. Remember, don't be alone with him. I'll stay right beside you. I took a deep breath and opened the door. Beatrice at my shoulder. Robert looked terrible, his normally immaculate appearance disheveled, his eyes red-rimmed, his expression a mixture of anger and desperation. Grace, he said, his voice strained. We need to talk. Hello? Robert, this isn't a good time. He noticed Beatrice and his eyes narrowed. Family matters should be discussed privately, don't you think? Beatrice is staying, I said firmly. If you have something to say, you can say it with her present. His jaw tightened, but he nodded. Fine. May I come in? I hesitated, then stepped aside. Better to have this confrontation in my home, surrounded by friends, than to refuse and drive him to more desperate measures. In the living room, Harriet and Dolores made no pretense of leaving, positioning themselves protectively near me as Robert perched awkwardly on the edge of a chair. Your police friends paid me a visit this afternoon, he began, a bitter edge to his voice. Something about falsified medical records. Yes, I replied simply. The guardianship papers with testimony from a doctor I've never met. He flinched slightly. A misunderstanding, Dr. Levinson was meant to examine you, but there was a scheduling error. Robert, I said gently, let's not add more untruths to this situation. You were planning to have me declared incompetent to gain control of my assets. Allison found the papers. The police have seen them. It's over. Something shifted in his expression, the polished facade crumbling to reveal raw desperation underneath. You don't understand. I had no choice. The firm is collapsing. Our house is being foreclosed on. Everything I've built is falling apart. I understand better than you think, I said. But trying to sacrifice me to save yourself wasn't the answer. What was I supposed to do? He demanded, voice rising. Watch everything I've worked for disappear. Let Allison see me fail. You have this big house, all these assets just sitting here wasted. Robert, Beatrice interrupted sharply, be very careful about what you say next. Threatening Mrs. Sullivan in any way could have serious legal consequences. He laughed hollowly. Legal consequences, I'm already facing those. Securities investigation, foreclosure, credit card debt, personal loans I can't repay. What's one more charge? A chill ran through me at his words. This was a man with nothing left to lose. There's another way, I said quietly. One that doesn't involve destroying what's left of your family. He looked up, suspicion warring with desperate hope in his eyes. What are you talking about? I know about your firm's lease at Riverfront Tower. It expires in 3 months. His brow furrowed in confusion. What does that have to do with anything? I own Riverfront Tower. Robert, or rather Walter did. Now I do. The color drained from his face. That's not possible. Maple Hill Enterprises owns Riverfront Tower. Maple Hill Enterprises was Walter's holding company, one of many. I leaned forward slightly. There's a great deal about Walter you never knew. He was much more than just a literature professor. Robert stared at me, stunned into silence. Walter left behind a substantial fortune, I continued. Patents, investments, properties, including the building where your firm has its offices. You're lying, he whispered, but there was no conviction in his voice. Beatrice handed him a document, the property deed for Riverfront Tower, with my name clearly listed as owner. How? He began, then stopped, his financial mind working quickly. How much Walter's estate? Approximately $47 million. Robert made a sound somewhere between a laugh and a sob. All this time, living in this old house, driving that old car, and you were sitting on millions. Walter and I valued different things than you do. Robert, money was a tool, not a goal. He shook his head, still struggling to process this revelation. Why are you telling me this now to gloat, to show me how badly I miscalculated? I'm telling you because there's still a way forward that doesn't destroy Allison's family. I met his eyes steadily. I've established a trust for Allison, $5 million, structured to provide for her and any children regardless of what happens between you. His eyes widened at the figure. $5 million. The trust is hers alone, protected from creditors including you, if necessary. But I'm also prepared to help stabilize your financial situation under certain conditions. Suspicion returned to his expression. What conditions? First, you get professional help, financial counseling and therapy to address whatever drove you to such desperate measures. Second, complete transparency with Allison about all financial matters going forward. Third, you sign legal documents relinquishing any claim to make medical or financial decisions on my behalf, ever. And in return, I'll extend your firm's lease at Riverfront Tower for 2 years at reduced rent. I'll also provide capital to address your most urgent debts, structured as a business loan with reasonable terms. Robert stared at me, clearly struggling to reconcile the Grace Sullivan he thought he knew with the woman before him, now not a vulnerable old lady to be manipulated, but a formidable opponent offering terms of surrender. "Why would you help me after what I tried to do?" he finally asked. "Not for you, Robert, for Allison and my grandchild." His head snapped up. "What grandchild?" I realized my mistake immediately. "Allison is pregnant. She hasn't told you yet because of everything that's happening." A complex mixture of emotions crossed his face. Shock, joy, shame, fear. "Pregnant, we've been trying for years." "Yes. Which is why I'm offering you this chance, not because you deserve it, but because that child deserves a father who isn't in prison for financial fraud and elder abuse." He flinched at the harshness of my words, then seemed to deflate, the last of his defenses crumbling. "I never meant for things to go this far. It started with one risky investment to try to get ahead, then another to cover the first. Then the market turned. Clients started withdrawing funds, and suddenly everything was spiraling out of control. The path to perdition is often paved with seemingly small compromises," I observed quietly. "Walter used to say that," he murmured, surprising me. I thought it was just academic nonsense at the time. We sat in silence for a moment, the grandfather clock in the hallway marking the seconds with solemn ticks. "I'll need to think about your offer," Robert finally said. "Of course, but don't take too long. The securities investigation won't wait, and neither will Allison's pregnancy." He stood to leave, then paused, looking around the room as if seeing it for the first time. "He really left you $47 million, Walter," the tweedy professor who graded papers at the kitchen table. I smiled slightly. Walter was many things, Robert, just as I am more than just an old lady in a big house. After he left, my friends surrounded me, Harriet practically vibrating with excitement. "The look on his face when you dropped the 47 million bomb," she exclaimed. "I wish I'd had a camera." "You're really going to help him after everything he's done?" Dolores asked, concern evident in her voice. "I'm going to give him a chance to redeem himself," I clarified. "For Allison's sake and for my grandchild. Whether he takes it is up to him." "It was masterfully done," Beatrice acknowledged. "You offered him a lifeline while ensuring he can never threaten you again." I sank into Walter's chair, suddenly exhausted. "I hope it's enough, for Allison's sake." "Speaking of Allison," Harriet said, "shouldn't you call her, let her know Robert knows about the baby now?" "Yes," I agreed, reaching for my phone. "And about everything else." The conversation with Allison was difficult but necessary. She was initially upset that I'd revealed her pregnancy but understood it had been accidental. More importantly, she seemed relieved that everything was finally in the open. "What do you think he'll do?" she asked after I'd explained my offer to Robert. "I don't know, sweetheart. He has a lot to process, but he seemed genuinely moved when I told him about the baby." "I should have told him myself," she said softly. "No matter what else is happening between us." "You can talk to him about it now," I suggested. "This might be the motivation he needs to accept help and make real changes." "Maybe." She sounded uncertain. "Mom, thank you for not giving up on him completely. I know what he tried to do to you was unforgivable. It's not about forgiveness, Allison. It's about finding a path forward that preserves what matters most: family, dignity, future generations." After hanging up, I found myself drawn to the garden despite the darkness. The night air was crisp with autumn's promise, the scent of fallen leaves and late roses mingling in the gentle breeze. Somewhere an owl called softly, answered by another in the distance. Walter and I had planted this garden together, planned each bed and path, watched it grow and change through the seasons of our life. Like all gardens, it had seen failures and successes, plants that thrived beyond expectation and others that withered despite our best efforts. Perhaps families were the same way. You planted, you nurtured, you adjusted to changing conditions. But ultimately, some things remained beyond your control. The best you could do was create favorable conditions and hope. 3 days passed before I heard from Robert again. In that time, Allison had met with him once, cautiously, in a public cafe. She reported that he seemed different, subdued, almost humble, though she remained wary of too quickly trusting the change. When Robert finally called, his voice was steady but lacking its usual confidence. "I've considered your offer, Grace. I'd like to accept your terms. All of them," I clarified, "including the therapy and financial counseling." "Yes," he paused. "I've already scheduled an initial appointment with a therapist, and I've spoken with the Securities Division investigators. I'm cooperating fully." "That's a good start, Robert." "I've also told Allison everything, all the debts, the failed investments, the measures I was considering. It was difficult, but necessary." I allowed myself a small hope that his transformation might be genuine. "And the baby?" His voice softened perceptibly. "We've talked about the baby. It changes things. Grace. Makes me see everything differently." "Children have a way of doing that," I agreed. "Putting our own concerns in perspective." "I don't expect you to forgive me," he continued. "What I was planning. There's no excuse for it, but I want you to know I'm genuinely sorry, and I'm committed to earning back Allison's trust, if not yours. Trust is rebuilt one day at a time, Robert, through actions, not words." "I understand. When would you like to meet to formalize our arrangement?" "Eleanor is preparing the necessary documents. She'll contact you directly to schedule." After hanging up, I sat for a long time in Walter's study, surrounded by his books and the subtle scent of leather and pipe tobacco that still lingered years after his passing. Had I done the right thing, offering Robert a way back from the brink? Or was I being naive, too willing to believe in redemption? "What would you have done, Walter?" I asked the empty room. "Would you have offered the same chance?" No answer came, of course. But as I ran my fingers along the spines of his beloved books, I remembered something he'd often said about his students. The ones who make the worst mistakes often have the greatest capacity for growth if given the proper guidance and consequences. "Are you ready for your close-up, Grace?" Harriet called from behind the camera tripod set up in my garden. "Your adoring fans await," I laughed, adjusting the wide-brimmed hat that had become something of a trademark on my YouTube channel. Wisdom in Bloom had grown from 5,000 subscribers to nearly 50,000 in the past 6 months, a surge in popularity I attributed to the authentic joy that now infused my gardening demonstrations. "Special episode today," I reminded her. My assistant makes her debut. On cue, Allison waddled into frame, her 7 months pregnant belly preceding her. "Assistant gardener reporting for duty," she announced with a grin. "Though I'm not sure how much bending and weeding I can manage these days." "You'll be the knowledge portion of our team," I assured her, explaining the architectural principles behind garden design while I do the dirty work. The past 6 months had brought changes I could never have predicted when Robert first suggested selling my home. After the initial chaos settled, we had found a new equilibrium, not perfect, but functional and increasingly healthy. Robert had, somewhat to my surprise, followed through on all his commitments. The therapy sessions had revealed deep-seated insecurities stemming from his modest background fears of failure and returning to poverty that had driven his riskiest financial decisions. With professional help, he was learning healthier ways to manage those fears. The securities investigation had resulted in fines and professional probation, but no criminal charges, partly due to his full cooperation and partly because the violations had stemmed more from desperate mismanagement than intentional fraud. Their house had been lost to foreclosure, but the trust I'd established for Allison had purchased a modest but comfortable home in a family-friendly neighborhood, a 3-bedroom craftsman with a generous yard and good schools nearby. The transition from their showplace mansion had been difficult for Robert, but he'd approached it with unexpected grace. Most surprisingly, Robert had discovered a talent for teaching. With Somerset Financial's reputation damaged by the investigation, he had accepted a position at the community college teaching financial literacy, a role that utilized his expertise while allowing him to help others avoid his mistakes. "Mom," Allison's voice pulled me from my reflections. "Harriet says we're losing the good light." "Sorry, just gathering my thoughts." I smiled at the camera. "Welcome to a special episode of Wisdom in Bloom. Today, My daughter Allison and I will be demonstrating how to plan a children's sensory garden perfect for introducing the next generation to the joys of nature. As we recorded the episode, I marveled at how naturally Allison and I worked together, finishing each other's sentences, gently teasing one another, sharing the easy rapport we'd had before Robert's scheme had temporarily driven a wedge between us. After the filming, as Harriet packed up the equipment, Allison settled on the garden bench beside me. "The nursery is finally finished," she announced, rubbing her belly absently. "Robert painted the constellation mural this weekend. It's beautiful. He has a talent we never knew about." People often discover new aspects of themselves during major life transitions, I observed. "Your father took up woodworking after retirement, created that arbor over there." She nodded, looking thoughtful. "Speaking of Dad's hidden talents, have you decided what to do with the rest of his fortune, besides my trust and the foundation?" In the months following the confrontation with Robert, I had established the Second Bloom Foundation, a nonprofit organization providing education, legal resources, and financial literacy training to older women. The foundation had already helped dozens of seniors protect themselves from financial exploitation and elder abuse. "I'm still considering," I replied. "Though I'm leaning toward expanding the foundation's work nationally, there are so many women like me who don't have friends like the unbreakable roses to protect them." Allison squeezed my hand. "Dad would be proud. Of all of it, how you handled Robert, how you protected me, how you're using his legacy to help others." "I think he would," I agreed. "Though I still wish he'd told me about his inventions and investments while he was alive. We could have done so much together." "Maybe he knew you'd find your own path when the time was right." She glanced at her watch. "I should get going. Robert's making dinner tonight. He's been taking cooking classes, if you can believe it." "Another hidden talent emerging," I smiled. "Will you bring him to Sunday dinner this week? Dolores is making her famous pot roast." Allison nodded, a hint of wonder in her expression. "It still amazes me that you've found a way to welcome him back into the family after what he tried to do. Family is complicated, sweetheart, and holding on to anger serves no one." I patted her hand. "Besides, your father always said that the measure of a person isn't that they never fail, but how they respond when they do." After Allison left, I remained in the garden as the afternoon light softened toward evening. The Japanese maples Walter had planted were at their peak autumn glory, their leaves a brilliant tapestry of crimson and gold against the deepening blue sky. So much had changed in a year. I had discovered Walter's secret fortune, faced down Robert's attempt to control my life, welcomed the news of a grandchild, and launched a foundation to help others avoid similar struggles. Through it all, my home had remained my sanctuary, the place where Walter's presence still lingered in every room, where memories lived in the walls and floorboards, where my garden continued to flourish under my care. "This isn't my final autumn after all. Walter," I whispered to the gentle breeze rustling through the maple leaves. "It's just the beginning of a new season for me, for Allison, for our growing family." As dusk settled over the garden, I gathered a small bouquet of late roses and autumn foliage to bring inside. Tomorrow, the unbreakable roses would gather for our weekly book club. Life would continue its forward motion, bringing new challenges and joys. And I would face them all with the wisdom, strength, and dignity Walter had always seen in me, even when I couldn't see it myself. I'm glad you followed my story until the end. What would you do if you were in my place? Have you ever been through something similar? Comment below and let me know which city you're watching from. If you enjoyed this story, check out The Inheritance Switch and Grandma's Secret Recipe, two other stories that are channel favorites.